I mean, I will often submit NPS on products that I use just to see what happens afterward. And
Me too.
like majority of them, there's no follow up, there's no closed loop.
Nothing.
They're just collecting the data for data's sake. And I think there's a huge missed opportunity for a digital CS or a scaled CS motion. That's why I think, I mean, in order to be successful in digital CS, you have to have people who are just innately super curious and willing to try and fail a lot. You'll find those breakthroughs, but they're always diamonds in the rough.
And once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Success Podcast with me, Alex Turkovich. So glad you could join us here today and every week as I seek out and interview leaders and practitioners who are innovating and building great scaled CS programs. My goal is to share what I've learned and to bring you along with me for the ride so that you get the insights that you need to build and evolve your own digital CS program. If you'd like more info, want to get in touch, or sign up for the latest updates, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. For now, let's get started. Hello, it's the Digital Customer Success Podcast. You've reached episode 41. That sounded like an answering machine message for those of you who know what answering machines are. I'm dating myself. Anyway, welcome to episode 41. Great to have you back. As always, today we have a fantastic conversation with Lane Hart. If you don't know who that is, he serves as VP of Customer Success at Contentsquare, formerly Heap, and has just an insane amount of really good insight into building and scaling digital programs or CS programs in general. He has a background in kind of data science, and as he made that transition into customer success a few years back, he brings a lot of that philosophy into what he does on a day-to-day basis. But brings a lot of just common sense smarts into his programs and shares a lot of that advice on this episode where we do talk about data. We also talk about service recovery philosophy, where you turn a negative experience into an overly positive one. We talk about metrics. We talk about the annoyance of surveys, in-app prompts, contact level data. I mean, we kind of go all over the place, but get your notepad out because there's a lot of really great insight in this conversation with Lane Hart. Mr. Lane Hart, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex. Been looking forward to this for a few weeks.
Yeah, it's good to have you. I typically like to start off with kind of a origin story type question, but we'll be kind of pointed with this one because, I do a little bit of LinkedIn stalking for all of my guests, as you should if you run a podcast. And one of the things that intrigued me about your past is your time as Speaker of the Student Senate at University of Cincinnati. I want to know more about that. Like, what was that all about, and how'd you get into that?
You really went below the fold on the scroll there.
Yeah, for sure.
We were chatting about Cincinnati. That was definitely a really good time. It was our student government at the University of Cincinnati, and it was, I mean, the role was basically just organizing like 30 or 40 senators from all of the colleges. Each college would send two senators, and it was intended to be, a quote unquote legislative body as much as any legislation that you could pass in a university would matter. But a couple of things that we did were basically pass funding legislation to give funding to student organizations and just like help out with visibility. It was definitely one of those things. I feel like it set me up well to wrangle a lot of people because you literally need to keep order in a meeting with 40 people who all have their own agenda, or sometimes after 3 hours of meeting are just like totally checked out. It was a lot of fun. We get to kind of banter back and forth, and people get to test their arguments and reasoning skills. So it was fun. And then I moved on from that to do some other student leadership stuff at the university, which also was a lot of fun. Made a lot of lifelong friends.
That's cool. Did you have a gavel?
I did. I actually have a like ceremonial gavel that's sitting at my parents' house in Ohio that it has like my name engraved on it. It's a prized possession.
That's awesome. So, the gap between, your time as Speaker of the Senate. Did I have that correct? Yeah, Speaker of the Student Senate. To now, you're in San Diego. You've been at Heap for 4 years. I think recently into a VP of CS role there. Fill in the gap a little bit. Like, what's the story of you getting into CS and that role specifically?
Wow. Yeah. I guess, it hasn't been that long, but it seems like it's
Mhm.
been a super long time. I don't know, around 10 or 12 years. I left. So after I graduated from the University of Cincinnati, I went into management consulting at IBM. And in that role, I was doing a bunch of like just really interesting work across like all over the world. And my focus was in data and data science. So all of the problems I was working on solving were somehow related to how can we use data to make better decisions.
Mm.
Through that, I got to work on really interesting stuff, ranging from how do you use Twitter data to predict what people are going to buy, or like use location data to understand how much revenue a store is going to do, or how to advertise the right things at the right time. We built a whole bunch of mobile apps that were like the Uber for concrete and cement delivery for a really large cement and concrete company. So you got
Wow.
to do like really interesting things all over the place. Again, made lifelong friends, and that kind of led. So I did that for around 8 or so years, and that kind of led me to wonder what else is out there. So I was working with a lot of consumer focused companies, so people that were either working like direct to consumer or B2B2C type business models. And I always was intrigued by software. Of course, IBM also made software, as mostly B2B
Mm.
software. So I started looking around at like this customer success role. I didn't really know what it was at the time, but I reached out to a friend of mine, Michelle, who's actually still at Heap. She and I had worked together, and I just told her like, "Hey, I'm looking, to potentially leave. Tell me more about customer success." And she said, "Hey, we're actually looking for somebody to scale up the team in New York. Why don't you consider this?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't even know anything about this company." It was like a 100-person company at the time, and
Sure.
she and Veronica, who was running customer success at Heap at the time, kind of sold me on the idea of building the team from a team of just a couple people to a pretty large team over the last few years. And it turned out to be honestly a career defining experience. Just met so many interesting people, worked on a lot of interesting problems. Our software Heap is customer analytics, product analytics. So what we're doing is trying to help digital builders understand how users are traversing through their flows. So it could be
Mm.
to buy something online, it could be to do a transaction inside of B2B software, it could be to do a financial transaction, and then understand where the friction is so that those digital builders can go in and fix and remove the friction so their users have an easier time doing what they're trying to do. So it actually brings together the aspects of consulting that I loved, which are around the change management as well
Mm.
as the kind of the people side of things. Like how do you actually compel people to make decisions using data instead of just using their gut, which turns out to be the hardest problem that we're always faced with. I've been doing a couple different things at Heap over the years. Scaled up the customer success team in New York, built a team in Europe, and then I moved actually into a role that I was sort of doing on the side. You end up with these roles where you're kind of like it's a passion project and then it turns into an actual job. So
Sure.
I created our customer success ops team, which is just a huge passion of mine because I love getting hands on with data, and then hired somebody else to run that team, and then came back to run the customer success team that I'm running now, and that has been a lot of fun. We've announced a definitive agreement to be acquired by another company called Contentsquare in the
Yeah.
near future. So really excited to join Contentsquare because there's a lot of complementarity between our products. We're doing
Hmm.
really a lot of the quantitative side of analytics and really getting the structured data and the funnels, and they're doing a lot on the qualitative side of analytics. So I'm really excited to blend the quant and qual together as we join forces. So
That's
that brings me
amazing.
to
Yeah.
today. And if that was an elevator, we would have gone up and down the World Trade Center like 4 times, maybe more.
Yeah, no, it's all good. That's it's a cool story. It's always fun to hear how folks end up like in these roles because everybody's path is so different. It's not as cut and dry as like a sales leadership role or something like that. It's always circuitous, which is a word I'm still working on. Um,
Yeah, I'm always trying to, when I'm hiring people too, I'm always trying to find people that are like the interesting unicorns who have done enough to
yeah.
understand like what we do, and be curious about it, but like
Hmm.
they don't have to come from a traditional CSM background, or just like a
No.
traditional management background. It just needs to be somebody who's curious about data and human behavior and how to, frankly, just how to make things happen. Because a lot of CS is just getting things done and building
Hmm.
a coalition of people to care about your customer and help them out.
Yeah, and I would imagine, you building that ops function, you probably saw a lot of that. And obviously we're talking about digital CS on this podcast, but I kind of view the ops function and digital CS can be interchangeable, can be separate, can be one, because there's a lot of kind of overlap in terms of like wrangling data, wrangling systems to,
Mm-hmm.
accomplish kind of a task. So I guess in that vein, one of the questions that I do like to ask all of my guests is essentially, what their definition of digital CS is because it does vary, right? So I'd be curious to get your take on it, especially given your background and data and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a blurred line, and that is
Mm.
how I got into, like, at the time we weren't even calling it digital CS, but it's how
Right.
I got into what we would now call digital CS. And we've gone, as probably everybody has, gone through several different, sort of like revamps of it over the past couple of years. Even it's
Yes.
still always changing every quarter. But I guess, I mean, one, it's to drive more impact with our human resources, which
Mm.
incidentally in a software company are pretty much always our largest cost. So it's
Hmm.
not to replace humans, really to assist them. It's not exactly ops because ops is more for internal purposes as I see it.
Yeah.
Of course, there
Yeah.
are lots of things that we do in ops that are customer facing. If it's done right, it improves customer satisfaction because you're giving them the resources they want and need at the moment when they need them, even if they didn't know exactly what they needed at the time. So just
Hmm.
having that's where you really marry the ops and data with the execution side of things. So if I had to think about, like, digital CS is the execution, the ops and analytics side is understanding what we should try to execute to improve customers' lives. And I
Hmm.
think the biggest thing is just like a lot of testing and learning. So
Yeah.
in that, one, our product is always changing. Two, our customers' needs are always changing. The competitive landscape is changing. We have to be really flexible to use the data that we have, like I call it the digital exhaust that's coming off of our platform, to
Yep.
understand like what are some unmet needs that we might be able to help with to delight our
Hmm.
users.
Um, I love that, and I love that you blended kind of the that enablement factor of enabling the team and making sure the team is running efficiently with obviously why CS is here is to drive customer outcomes and make customers successful. And I I think that my hunch anyway, after speaking with you and chatting with you a little bit, but also looking into your background a little bit, is that your history and passion around data and data science has probably benefited you throughout kind of the roles that you've had, but then specifically in CS because I mean, if you ask me, one of the most valuable and probably looked over products of a healthy CS organization is like the data into the data insights that we can glean from various data sources and things like that. So my hunch is, and I'm putting words in your mouth, that you probably had a kind of a advantage going into setting up a CS org, coming at it from that angle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely it has helped a lot. I
Hmm.
think it's you don't have to have a background in data or data science, but definitely a curiosity to know what's possible. I think one of your guests, whose name was also Lane, which I was really fascinated by,
Yeah,
from Gainsight,
sure.
she kind of talked about how data relates to data, and I loved that term because it really is just knowing like what data is out there, how might you tie it together to
Hmm.
tell to one to come up with a story of what are the 20% of things that you can do to drive the 80% impact.
Right.
And a lot of that, like just comfort in working with data and working with messy data, definitely came from
Hmm.
my time like dealing with tweets and social media data, or dealing with trying to join together data sets from different backend systems and that kind of stuff. In a growing company like ours, or like probably most of the people listening to this podcast, large companies or growing companies, most of the data is messy and you have to get super comfortable with it being mostly accurate or directionally accurate, and then having some backup plans in place. So I think
Hmm.
that comfort with things not being perfect probably went a long way. I see a lot of people, or talk to a lot of people who are trying to start a digital CS program, and they basically get stuck because the data is not perfect, and
Yeah.
they're stressed out that they're going to mess something up, or
Yeah.
like the ever dreaded thing where you send the wrong email to the wrong person, or for a long time we were worried about our entitlements database being like slightly inaccurate, and then we would send messages to people saying, hey, you're not using this thing, or you're not entitled to this thing, why don't you go check it out? And then they respond back and they're like, wait a second, we already have this. But I mean, ultimately you are going to make some mistakes like that, and when that happens, I usually just reach out to the customers and just say, hey, like we're trying to improve right now, we're trying to do things at scale, and everyone, I've never had someone who is not understanding about it. It creates a nice human moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that piece of it probably helped in terms of starting out in CS and starting out in digital CS. I would say the other piece that really helped is most people, and I mean, I work like run a customer success organization for a company that is all about data. Most of the
Hmm.
people that we work with are not comfortable working with data. It's their first time doing it,
Yeah.
or they're making really consequential decisions. And so a lot of the job is just how do you compel people to care about using data? And that's really like a change management exercise. So what I
Hmm.
found in my career working in data science is that you really need to explain how you got to the answer. Like when your math test gets graded and you get like bad marks for not showing your work on how you got there. If you
Yeah.
can show your work and you bring everybody along, it goes a really long way to the change management and getting people to use data, and more than just using it, get curious about what more could we do, because everybody has some great idea, they just may not know
Hmm.
exactly how to execute on it. So if they see what's possible, they see the work that you did to get there, then all the time I have people come up with ideas. Like somebody said, hey, can we pull in our community data and then use that to ping people when questions don't get answered by
Sure.
one of their peers, and then how can we build that into our health score? So it's three different people came up with three different ideas, all relating to the same data, that all make our
Hmm.
customers' lives better.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is lurking everywhere. You just got to kind of go look for it and think about it creatively. And I really like what you
Yeah,
said, um, about just not being afraid to jump in, because so much of kind of what we do in CS is gracefully falling on our sword a little bit and not being afraid to do so, because
yeah,
like honestly it is those human moments that actually make a huge difference, versus if everything's kind of hunky-dory and by the book and by the recipe or whatever, you're probably missing some great opportunities to connect with your customers organically. And it
yeah.
also shows that you're trying to do things and to improve upon the experience. It's not like we're purposely going out of our way to like send extra emails, but
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like I'm sure a lot of people have heard of this service recovery philosophy. It's basically
mm,
like, you
I
have,
love that.
if something is broken, you actually have an opportunity to not only fix it and do the right thing, but dramatically improve the relationship. And this is like
Yeah.
one of my favorite things with digital CS. This is actually one of the first, now that I think about it, it's like one of the first things before we even had digital CS as a function. One of the first
Yeah.
things that I did at Heap was really use our NPS program as a way of driving those service recovery moments. So, I mean, yes, we definitely care about having a high NPS score, but what I care
Mhm.
a lot more about is finding the specific people who are struggling and then turning their moment of frustration, because usually most people, as an in-product survey, they'll like rage submit a negative
Yeah.
response. So you
Right.
see the ones that are like, under like they're 2 or 3 or 4. Those are people who are really struggling right now. And if we
Hmm.
can figure out exactly what they're struggling with and reach out with some help, and then just offer, an olive branch, say like, hey, come talk to us. We truly want to help you. That often turns things around. And then we measure, how did they respond the next time they responded? And if we're
Yeah.
able to close those loops live, our response rate goes, more than like, or sorry, our NPS for those people who responded negatively goes up. Like typically people will become, go from being a detractor to being a passive or a promoter over time
Hmm.
if we've done effective interventions. And that's kind of like really, I mean, that's been done for a long time since NPS has been a thing. But
Sure.
I mean, I will often submit NPS on products that I use just to see what happens afterward. And
Me too.
like majority of them, there's no follow up, there's no closed loop.
Nothing.
They're just collecting the data for data's sake. And I think there's a huge missed opportunity for a digital CS or a scaled CS motion.
I was gonna say exactly the same thing. Massive missed opportunity, and NPS comes up quite a bit on the show. I mean, because
People
most
love to hate
program
NPS, and the
people
score
love
doesn't
to
really
hate
matter.
NPS, and exactly. I think for me, the two most valuable bits of NPS are kind of what we were talking about, right? The score, okay, you know, fine. But the gold is in the comments. The gold is in
Mm-hmm.
the comments that you can then distribute internally and try to make some improvements. The real gold is when you actually respond and actually engage on the back of those responses, because A, it shows that you're listening, but B, it drives engagement down the road. It's one of
Oh
those
yeah.
touch points that can really help secure renewal, quite frankly, or make a customer, even if things aren't hunky dory, they know you're listening. They know they've got,
Yeah.
they've got a window into the organization. And so, even though they may be evaluating some other solutions or whatnot, at the end, that could be one of the things that makes them stick around, because
Oh
you've
yeah,
got
I
your
mean, or
back.
just knowing ahead of time and just getting especially in our like primarily, like we have so we have a traditional CS motion, which is pretty high touch to very high touch, and then we have pooled motion that
Mm,
digital is sort of an overlay across all of these. But within the
sure.
pooled accounts, we're often pushing out content as you would
Hmm.
from a digital standpoint, trying to get users to come in and say, hey, this is the thing that I care about, or, based on our signals, here's something that we see it looks like you're struggling with or you haven't done yet that you should have done by now. And within that base, these interventions are super important because it gives
Hmm.
people a chance to just raise their hand and say, hey, something is not quite right. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what the thing is, but if we can just talk to them or just even exchange email messages with them, it goes a really long way to understanding more about their context, diffusing any potential risk or frustration for that person and the
Hmm.
account. And I mean, many times often leads to an upsell because they're frustrated that they can't do something that they could do if they had one of our products that they didn't even
Sure.
know that we sold.
Yeah, right, exactly. What on that topic, what are some of the, I guess, your favorite motions that you have in place that are, either particularly like effective, or things that are just cool, like from a CS
Mm-hmm.
nerd perspective?
Yeah, one of the challenges I think on your podcast and on all such podcasts, this is often discussed, just the lack of data cleanliness on contact level data. So you
Yeah.
have, all the issues that I'm sure have been talked about ad nauseum, where people put in a name, they put in the wrong name, they combine their names together, and then all of a sudden you're saying, High Lane Hart instead of just saying High
Yeah.
Lane.
Yeah. Or the caps lock was on, and so it's all
the caps lock is on, or they put it in all
whatever.
lowercase, and it's obvious that everything is messed up in our systems.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, that's like, that's pretty recoverable, and we have algorithms that, scripts that will run to try to fix that. But the thing that is most difficult actually is,
see, right there with that statement, you're already above where a lot of people are. Like,
you've fixing the casing.
Yeah,
and stuff?
yeah. Totally.
Oh,
Because I think a lot of folks, that they'll have these, they'll have user databases or whatever, and it's just like whatever it was put in by so and so, and that's just what it is. And then it's like a manual or an outsourced type of situation to go fix it. So that right there is actually quite interesting because I think a lot of people struggle with that exact thing.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like a Salesforce mini app idea, or maybe this already exists and somebody should write into us and tell us, where you just plug this thing in and it just fixes the bad contact data that's coming into your CRM.
Yeah, if you out there, if you, the listener, have something like that, like an app or something that automatically goes through and cleanses your Salesforce contact data, comment down below.
Yeah, that will be your next guest. And definitely call me as well, because then we won't have to do all this stuff manually.
Exactly.
But so that one of the that is one of the challenges that we have, that, and just knowing who's still at the company, who's a decision maker at the company, how are people related to departments within the company? Because I could go on a little bit of a tangent here about the departments and the breadth of adoption. So one of the things that we care a lot about is that multiple teams, different departments, are using Heap to make decisions. Reason why is that it reduces confusion within their organization, ultimately reduces cost of people using different data sets to try to make decisions. And of course, it makes our platform stickier, because now you're making decisions using the data that you collected from Heap and using charts in Heap. So I actually started, this is kind of like a crawl, walk, run thing. So I started off with just an app queue in our product that would just ask people when they were signing in for the first time, which department are you a part of?
What do you do?
What do you do? And what are your goals? Like, why did you come here today? And we had to keep it really short because we were afraid of adding undue friction in our sign up process. And in fact, this is actually why we ended up with kind of shallow data in the first place, because we wanted to make it very frictionless to sign up. Remember, our company is all about removing friction. And we looked at, okay, if you ask too many questions, people will drop off in the beginning of the flow. There's a really interesting Lenny's podcast from a few months back about someone talking about PLG and how they were actually saying it's fine to ask the questions you need to ask, because if people drop off, they weren't very high intent anyway. And B2B software is, the expectation is you're going to give up that kind of information. Anyway, back to the thing. So we collected that information just using an app queue, fed it into Salesforce using Zapier, and then used that to basically say, okay, how are we doing from a breadth standpoint across accounts? Do we have people in product, in marketing, in customer success, in data and engineering, all using Heap? And if not, how do we get more people across those teams using it? Or how do we get people to identify themselves? So then what we did is we created just basically a feedback loop where we use Marketo to send emails. So we look at, when we send out emails, are those emails being delivered or are they bouncing? With all the turnover that you have in companies today, people stick around for, there's some different numbers out there, but it's under 2 years on average. So people are leaving, and we need to know, are these people dormant or did they just leave the company? Oftentimes their email bounce is probably 70% accurate at saying they left the company. So that was one of the cool things, is just flagging contacts that had left, and then using that to flag accounts where we don't have any relationship contacts or we don't have any contacts in a certain department. And then just teeing up a message that goes out to those accounts through Catalyst, which is our customer success platform, to say, hey, it looks like this person left and they were, in such role at your company. Did this person actually leave? If they did, who is the new person that's taking over? One of the challenges that we had was, okay, if you're trying to reach out to people by email and they're no longer there, obviously you're not going to get a response. So there's different levels to it. we just send this message to some of the top users in the account
Yeah.
based on who's logged in most recently. And it actually is very effective at getting those people who are top users care a lot about the platform continuing to exist at their company, and us being able to reach out to the right people there. So usually they give us the information, we're able to update things so that when we send out messages, we're sending them out to the right decision makers in each department. And that has really helped us with the dormancy problem where, if we don't have that top level alignment, the account will over time just sort of erode because no one is administering the account.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I know that a lot of times we're just afraid to send those kinds of messages,
Mm.
because we're like, hey, we don't know you that well. Can you help us out? Kind of. But I think that is whereas that can be viewed as something that is negative. I think also on the flip side, it's a point of engagement, and you're
Yeah.
asking your most avid users to say, hey, help us out, keep us up to date so that we can serve you better. And I think it's all in the semantics, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
in how you message that. Going back to something that you said earlier, which I thought was interesting, was um, almost this notion of in PLG using survey completion, like the amount of completion of a survey as almost like an engagement metric, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
kind of interesting. Like, if somebody goes through and completes 5 out of the 10 questions in your survey versus somebody who completes the 10 out of the 10 questions, you could almost say that, hey, this person is a little bit more engaged with your company, much less the software, but maybe the company, and therefore is somebody that you could use as an advocate or something like that. I thought that was very interesting and kind of one of the side benefits of surveying, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think you have to be careful. I mean, the big thing with surveys is they're so annoying. I mean, people,
Yeah.
when it's the end of the quarter because people have some goal in their company goals to send out a survey or get a certain response rate,
Yeah.
or just a certain score, and then I
Mm-hmm.
will always see at the end of a month just a bunch of messages piling up, and you have to be really careful not to bombard people. So that's
For
actually
sure.
we have a bunch of pretty sophisticated logic that keeps us from over surveying or asking too much too
Mm-hmm.
much feedback without a direct benefit. We do a lot of surveying. Like our product team does a lot of surveying to especially our long tail of customers to get customer interviews of people that are doing specific things in our product.
Mm-hmm.
And usually people are really willing to participate in those. Sometimes they'll be compensated. Sometimes it's just product people love
Yeah.
talking to other product people, and those are our users or
Yeah.
user researchers, UX people.
Yeah. Interesting. How do you coordinate that? Because one of the epic problems is like, hey, marketing wants some information and sales wants some information and CS wants some information and product you know is like, do you y- right, exactly, okay, question answered.
Yeah, I mean, I think the good thing is if you have a small enough team or a team that is cohesive enough, you can
Hmm.
strike that balance between someone is the human router or traffic cop to make sure that you're not inundating a specific
Yeah.
base of people. But you also kind of want to just leave it open and let people,
Hmm.
tell you if it's too much. So
Hmm.
we're more laissez-faire about it than other places I've seen where if
Yeah.
somebody wants to reach out to customers, we're not going to say go send this to 1,000 users at once. But if you have a
Right.
list of 100 people that you want to reach out to, maybe 5 or 10 of them will end up responding. Um, we've been pretty much willing to do that, and we haven't seen any major repercussions. Where we do have issues is, and it's not an issue; it's just a thing that happens. We have multiple different teams that are all they all have the same goal, which is to engage our user base, and
Hmm.
that kind of comes from sales, it comes from customer success, it comes from product, it comes from product/product marketing, it comes from marketing, and from our scaled adoption team. So
Yeah.
we do have a process like where we just say, hey, these are the sends that are happening, and this is the relative size of those sends to make sure that we don't send 2 messages per day about totally different topics and then the metrics that we look at to monitor that are really the unsubscribe rate to make sure that we're
Mm,
not, overlapping too many sends and then, annoying people because they got 3 messages that didn't seem coordinated at all.
totally. Yeah, absolutely. I
That's a
had
big problem.
probably,
I think there should be like an
it's a
app
big
to
problem.
solve that problem as well. Of just like, hey, there probably
Yeah.
is also. We're just not using it. Like, put all of your campaigns and then prioritize them smartly
Yeah.
so that the ones that are going to drive the highest impact will get sent first, and the rest just go into a
Right.
backlog.
Exactly. Like a queue kind of deal. Um, yeah. And, obviously there's some folks who use different systems to send different emails too. And that just
Hmm.
exacerbates the problem because there's no communication between the two. I had a
Yeah.
horrid experience with this kind of stuff recently. I won't mention the company, but it was like pre-sale. They were very aggressive in their emails and calls to like drive the close. And then
Mm.
post sale, they were incredibly aggressive. I probably heard from 6 or 7 different people, like texting, calling,
Oh wow,
emailing multiple times
texting is pretty
to like
invasive.
drive an upsell.
Wow.
Totally. And I was just like, I didn't respond to any of them. And then they start sending me, experience surveys. And I gave it to them. Like, I was just like, this
Good.
is not cool. Like,
No.
stop. Because it was very obvious that it was like an outsource type situation. And it was
Mm.
like it wasn't a coordinated outsource situation. It was like 20 different people, like, got a lead for, hey, if you can upsell these people, it's just like
Yeah.
so stupid. Anyway, it was like the epitome of what not to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because, like, if I think about our tech stack, we have like a pretty rational tech stack. We use
Hmm.
Marketo for the majority of our email sends across like marketing and product marketing. We use SendGrid to send transactional emails from our product. We use
Mm.
Catalyst to send post-sale customer success emails. Our sales team uses Outreach to send, like prospecting emails in some sequences for
Yeah,
even post-sale customers that they're managing. And then, of course, we have like just Gmail that's going back and forth with customers. What
sure.
I've found is that even though Salesforce is far from perfect for this, we bring all the data into the activity feed in Salesforce and into our own
Mm.
product, Heap. And
Hmm.
so we basically have all these touch points streaming into those two platforms. And then we can use those to build suppression lists. It's far from perfect though, because you don't really get the priority of every message. You can just look at the saturation of messages per
Yeah,
recipient or per account. But it kind of, I mean, if you look at the
right.
source, you can kind of infer what the message was about based on which system it's being sent from. But there's
Hmm.
definitely not a one size fits all thing. And I've had several different companies try to sell them, and I just don't believe it because some of these systems are so entrenched that we're not going to get rid of them.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. That's cool though. I like that notion of, collecting everything and then throttling a little bit. Depending on the volume. That's super smart.
Yeah,
One
it's,
of
it's
the
definitely not perfect. So if anybody's listening to this and they're like, that's BS, they're definitely not doing that. I apologize. Let me know what we did.
one of the things that we spoke about previously was this notion of just kind of standardizing metrics across departments and really trying to get on the same page cross departmentally with the goals and what you're really trying to drive. Can you chat a little bit more about what that looks like at Heap and what you're driving specifically?
We have a company value called Taste the Soup, which might be like,
I
eat
love
your own
that.
dog food or drink your own champagne somewhere.
Sure.
And we like really try to live this every day because since we are a product analytics company, we have lots and lots of data.
Hmm.
And we are a self-serve platform. So everybody in our company is using Heap for various things. One of the like sort of age-old challenges that we've had is just what is the definition of active usage? And
Mm.
then what's the definition of value driving usage? Because you can have active usage without value driving usage. And it's easy if you have if you don't know what value looks like for your customer, for your user, you're going
Yeah.
to end up inferring that they're fine when they're not, and then you're not driving some of the most important interventions. So one of the things that we did a few quarters ago is just launch a cross-functional team, which is spearheaded by Daniel, who leads our product analytics team, who's amazing. Huge shout out to Daniel, to get alignment on these definitions of basically our version of MAU, WOW, and DAO, which we call monthly querying users, weekly querying users, and daily users. And then we have a few others that drive sort of like what we infer is value driving behavior, like repeating certain actions within the platform. And for the longest time, like for a couple of years, we were all customer success was using our own definition, product was using a definition, our like analytics team was using a different definition. So we just created this cross-functional team and basically said we need to figure out what these metrics are, and then we're just going to bless these and lock these down, and we're only going to use a certain set of events to calculate them, so that when you are driving interventions, we're not driving interventions to the wrong people. So I guess communication is probably the number one thing. We're awash with data, but it's really just communicating on the metrics that matter, or the metrics that we're going to decide matter together. And then I think the other big thing that helped with standardization is just putting those metrics on display in front of the entire company. So we have a system where we track all of our OKRs as a company. These are always metrics that are what we call like top line metrics. So metrics that, we just track all the time, even if they're not at a specific OKR for that quarter. That has really helped just with the visibility, because it gets everyone thinking about how can I drive those metrics. And it also gets people thinking, okay, I have an idea how we could, sort of rev on this metric together, bring it to the right people. Or, oh, wait, I was actually using a different metric to measure success of my OKR. I need to make sure it's tied back to this one. So we don't really have anyone policing it, but organically by setting the definitions with the with the department leads, and then making them widely available in our own platform and in our data systems, we've pretty much driven away the behavior of people using different metrics or just like random metrics all the time. That's from a product usage standpoint. And I would say that actually one of the things that we have more trouble with now that we've moved on from that challenge is our commercial data and segmentation. So everybody wants to know, what commercial, like what segment is this customer in terms of how we cover that account. And then what motion are they in terms of the type of servicing that they get from us. And getting that data accurate, maintaining it based on our contractual commitments, and then propagating it out across our systems is kind of an ever-present challenge. And I think, as with any data quality, it's never really going to go away. But that is the current challenge that we're focused on. And if anybody has great ideas, I'm all ears. Again, kind of goes back to communication and just communicating who owns that piece of data. We had a whole cross-functional team for Salesforce to just say, okay, let's list out all of the top data elements that we have. We had this spreadsheet that had 500 rows. Does anyone even know what this one means anymore? If not, let's get rid of it. If people do know what it means, then who owns it? And if somebody owns it and it's similar to another one, let's call that person, or just have a big call where it's kind of a clearinghouse. That is the way that we've been solving it so far. And it's helped us kind of, make a dent in those standard metrics. So I guess my overall advice is put the metrics in public for everyone to see. Make it easy to know who to go to when something doesn't look right or when someone has questions, and then patiently deal with all of the discrepancies to encourage people to come to the table when they have data problems, instead of reinventing the wheel on their own and trying to make their own thing, because it'll save them time for that one thing they're trying to do. And then it'll create 10 times more problems in a quarter from now.
That's great. Yeah, I love that advice. And I think data hygiene is something that everyone struggles with. Show me somebody who doesn't struggle with data hygiene, and I'll show you a liar.
Yeah. I mean, every company, from the tiniest companies to the biggest companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think the other thing too is just taking and this is something that I do and my team does with our clients all the time, trying to figure out what are those value driving actions or moments. And sometimes they're
Mm-hmm.
a specific action that you repeat over and over. Sometimes it's a threshold of a certain number of times that a user has done a thing, or a certain number of users on an account that has done that
Mm-hmm.
thing. So for us, it's like saving reports and pinning them to dashboards, and then sharing those dashboards with other people to drive that virality. Um, what I find is that most of the teams that we talk to don't know what those like secondary metrics are that drive the Mau Wow DAO type metrics. And
Mm-hmm.
figuring those out is the biggest unlock for digital customer success, because it
Yeah.
allows you to intervene at those moments that matter, or when people are on, one side or the other of that threshold. So you're not telling them something that's really pedantic that they probably don't care about, or they're already past it. And so that you're not going way over their head with the 103 course when they need the 101 level
All
course.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all this stuff is reminding me of a conversation I had several weeks ago with Dan Ennis, who, is fairly well known in CS circles
Yeah,
for
very
being,
much so.
yeah. So, but one of the things that he does really well within his organization is using usage data to figure out what persona somebody is likely to be
Mhm.
within a customer, which I think is fascinating. To do those kinds of things as well. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
really awesome to
basically that
hear.
is next
Yeah,
level. If someone is doing that, they
yeah.
are probably in the top 20, 10 or 20% of sophistication, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this is like one of my like personal principles. It doesn't have to be perfect. So if you're listening to this and you're like, "Holy cow, how am I going to figure out,
It's like I
infer
give up.
people's, you know, persona based on their behavior?" Just start with
Yeah,
something. Just try to find that one active usage metric that is not
yeah.
just like they logged into the platform, and then just run a test around that, and eventually you'll figure it out.
Totally, absolutely, absolutely. You know, do it. See if it works. If it doesn't, go back and do it again. Figure something else out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just those learning loops, and that's why I think. I mean, in order to be successful in digital CS, you have to have people who are just innately super curious and willing
Hmm.
to try and fail a lot. You'll find those breakthroughs, but they're always diamonds in the rough.
I think so too. Well, cool. As we kind of start to round out our convo, because we're getting towards the top of the hour here, and I want to be respectful of your time. I'd love for you to give us a quick download of what's in your content diet. What do you pay attention to on a regular basis?
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. I mean, of course, I listen to your podcast. There are a bunch of other good CS podcasts out there, but I also really like to expand beyond CS and really like think
Hmm.
about what is the persona of people that we are serving, which are largely product people or digital builders. Lenny's podcast is one that I mentioned earlier that's amazing for that,
Yeah,
because he has a lot of guests on who are just like top practitioners in their field, and they're often
yeah.
talking about product led growth, or how do you make the product just easier to use. And at the end of the day, like that's really the nexus of digital CS, is like how do you
Hmm.
make the product and the people work together and get the people to do the things that your product is intended to do. So there are a bunch of good episodes that I could share on that topic, and just also kind of goes
Cool.
into aligning active usage metrics and stuff. I also tend to like my wife always gives me a hard time because I'm always like reading the what she calls business self-help books.
Yeah.
So there's one that I read recently, which is I have it sitting here on my desk, Scaling People by Claire Hughes Johnson. She
Oh,
was the
cool.
CEO of Stripe. I'm sure many people have read that. Fantastic book for anybody who is leading a large organization or relatively small organization, because she gives like very digestible, very specific tips and frameworks. So it's a great book of frameworks. And then
Hmm.
one that I read recently, actually listened to it while I was running on audiobook, is called Nudge. It's kind of
Hmm.
about behavioral psychology. And that is really interesting just in terms of like what motivates people to take certain actions. And when you think about digital CS, like what we're doing all day is trying to motivate people
We're
to,
nudging.
care about a thing, or to like nudge them into doing something and
Hmm.
connecting with what they see as valuable and what we offer. And then the last one, which is definitely a personal self help book, is Getting Things Done, which is a pretty old
Yeah.
book. Some of the stuff in the book is kind of outdated now because it's all like paper process. But
Right.
there's an app called OmniFocus that is like a task management app. So for anybody who has a lot of things going on, I would definitely recommend that one.
Cool. I love it. Amazing, amazing little tidbits. Any folks that you would want to give a shout out to, digital
Yeah,
CS
I think
related?
Yeah, a couple. Recently, somebody that I've been working a lot with is a co-founder of an app called Thena,
Mm.
Thena.ai. Mike Molinet and his team, Jared and Sid and a bunch of other people over there. What they're doing is making, like, basically helping us scale Slack. So we're introducing customer Slack channels to many of our customers, and
Oh,
they
cool.
kind of help with bridging the when people ask questions, how do we make sure those questions get answered in a timely way that doesn't overwhelm
Hmm.
people from being in a bunch of Slack channels? And then how can we use
Hmm.
that for customer marketing as well? So it's definitely just an amazing team, but also really useful app for kind of the next iteration and getting out of just email as the only channel that we email
Yeah.
or in app that we use to communicate with people without being super invasive and trying to send people text messages because I think that's one step too far. So yeah, the story that you told is like wow.
Yeah.
So
It's
Mike
not
is
cool.
definitely one great person
Okay.
to reach out to and to follow. They put out lots of great content. That's kind of in the vein of scaled CS as well. I don't know if
Cool.
anybody has ever mentioned Mark Costaglo, who's the CRO at Catalyst. He runs all of their go-to-market functions, including post-sale. And he has a framework that he shared with me a couple times recently, actually, called Moments of Impact. And it's
Mm.
basically how do you get to these like specific moments of impact that are going to drive, like the customers say, wow, this is valuable and I love this product. That like the reason why I really love that framework is because it relates really well to just kind of like reaching the next stair step with customers, and it
Hmm.
can be applied digitally or through a higher touch motion. Um,
Hmm.
and then actually, Wes is the person who runs Scaled CS at Catalyst. And Wes has been doing a lot of that kind of like orchestration of where the rubber hits the road. How do you help the CSMs as well as the long tail with reaching those moments of impact without being annoying and just like sending the same webinar content over and over? So I think they
Right.
both work really well together in doing a pretty good job of deploying that content. And of course, one of the things I love using their product is that they're also tasting their own soup in making the product better by using it for digital CS.
Yeah. That's
And then
amazing. Awesome
the
shout outs. Yeah.
last shout out is a buddy of mine, Todd Bustler, who he and Stephen Ruff started a company called Champify, which helps you keep track of contacts as they move on. Which this has been a huge challenge for us,
Mm.
and kind of
Yeah.
a part of that motion that I mentioned earlier, where you have people who are leaving. We send alerts to the CSMs and say, hey, these people are leaving. Let's figure out who the new economic buyer is on this account. And we can do that at scale. And then we also turn
Hmm.
around and use that for sales as well, because if somebody was
Sure.
a really happy customer and they move to a new company, we can sell to them there. So Todd puts out a lot of great content just in terms of like little tidbits on LinkedIn that really are catered a lot towards sales, which is their main audience, but much of it is
Hmm.
relevant to CS as well, just how to get people's attention.
I had a conversation with someone recently, not on the podcast, but about this notion of CSQLs and how a CS qualified lead doesn't necessarily need to come from an account that you have. It can come from someone who you used to work with that at an account that has moved on or whatever, and is like I think there's a lot of value in tracking those
Yeah.
people and kind of where they go within the ecosystem of potential clients.
Yeah, I mean, we typically find like the close rate on those accounts, the time to close is like, 3 or 4 times faster than it is with just somebody who's
Hmm.
never talked to us or
Hmm.
used our platform before. And from a customer success standpoint, they get it, right? Like they struggled with some of these challenges before. So their onboarding is always much, much smoother than somebody who we haven't worked with. So we're always
Yeah.
happy to have those repeat customers and users.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Well, Lane, I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been great spending time with you again, and good to have you on the show. Where can people find you, engage with you, and reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can definitely find me on LinkedIn, Lane Hart, LaneHart, and on the Heap community, which is community.heap.io, or you can just reach me by email, lane@heap.io. So pretty easy to get in touch with.
Easy.
I always try to respond to folks on LinkedIn, so and I'm like truly curious to connect with people who are doing things even that are like
Yeah.
totally different or adjacent to the space. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out. One of the things I'll often do with folks who reach out is talk about health score. So how can you build an actionable health score? And you can find some stuff on our Heap community that I publish there about that as well.
Ooh, that's cool. Okay. We'll have to hit that the next time you're on the show.
All right. We'd love to come back in the new year.
Sounds good. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alex. Have a good one.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital Customer Success Podcast. If you like what we're doing, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really helps us to grow and to provide value to a broader audience. You can view the Digital Customer Success definition word map and get more details about the show at digitalcustomersuccess.com. My name is Alex Turkovich. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next time.